Hey, what's going on, everybody? I have a special guest here. We're going to talk about the Miami USC game. First off, shout out to Griffin. Hopefully, you enjoy the game tonight. I have Matt Zemek here, covers USC for TrojansWire. What's going on, Matt?
A fascinating matchup and one that I think Miami should feel very good about.
It's interesting you say that because there's a lot of things that USC does well that I think can give Miami troubles. And when we talk about the NCAA tournament, a big term that we'll always use is matchups. And let's get right into it. USC is the 7 seed in the Midwest region. Miami's the 10. USC 22 in the AP poll, 26-7 overall. Let's start with 14-6, third in the pack. Let's start with their best player, Isaiah Mobley. And I think that's where the matchup thing gets very interesting to me. 6'10 forward, finished strong last year in the postseason run there. What makes Isaiah tough?
So the thing with Isaiah Mobley, I don't know how much of a chance you got to watch him last year when he was playing alongside his brother, Evan Mobley. But last year, Isaiah Mobley took too many shots because he had Evan Mobley on the floor. So he should have been deferring to his brother, but he didn't always do that. This year, you've seen Isaiah Mobley really think like a professional basketball player. And he's going to go, I think, in the first round of the NBA draft. Maybe not a lottery pick, but I think in the first round. And the reason for that, he has focused on making himself a complete two-way player. He's seen what his brother has done in the NBA. Evan Mobley, he's a superstar not because of his offense, it's because of his defense. He can guard so many positions. He's such a versatile defender. And so Isaiah Mobley watched what his younger brother did, and he said, you know what? My ticket to the pros is not being an elite scorer. It's being an elite two-way player. Going to defend well, going to rebound well, going to position myself on the court well, going to pass well. Isaiah Mobley just does all the things that a basketball player needs to do fairly well. He just has rock-solid competence in various areas. He's not a dominant scorer, but he will give you responsible, mature defense, rebounding, passing. He makes himself useful at both ends of the floor. Now, USC this year has had a season in which the best players don't play well at the same time. So on one night, Isaiah Mobley will play well and Boogie Ellis and Drew Peterson won't. And then the next night they take turns. They trade places basically. But Isaiah Mobley is the most consistent guy. He's the guy who you can count on to play solid defense, to rebound like that. That's there whether or not he scores. And so he has also become a much better passer this season. So that's really what Isaiah Mobley brings. It's not so much the scoring, it's that he does a lot of things well, and he will generally make responsible decisions with the ball.
So these two teams are certainly very interesting. Miami's making its first appearance in the tournament since 2018. They go 23-10. They've won they're 7-3 in their last 10 games. USC's dropped 3 of their last 4, so kind of different directions, but different experience. USC last year makes it to the Elite Eight. Mobley was big in all tournament games. I did watch him throughout the season last year. I remember how well he was playing, average 16-6 in the tournament games. And I think, that experience will be a factor as well. I think, just to see how these teams will respond to different environments. One thing I note about Miami quite a bit is how well they've played away from home this year. They're 13-5 away from home, but USC's 13-4. So two teams playing well away from home, and then that's always key. Obviously, USC's got to make that trip across the country. These teams will play Friday at 3:10 Eastern, 12:10 Pacific. They're on True TV in Greenville, South Carolina. Let's stick more to USC. Let's go when they're playing their best. And we've seen that throughout the year at times, but when they're at their best, what do they do well, Matt?
Well, when USC is at its best, one thing happens more than anything else, and that is that Drew Peterson shoots well. Now, he is an erratic, inconsistent shooter, but when he gets hot, USC is extremely tough to beat. And part of that is self-evident because so much attention is paid to Isaiah Mobley and Boogie Ellis. So if you have a third guy hitting shots, well, then Isaiah Mobley is not going to get double teamed, and Boogie Ellis will have a better chance of getting into the paint with the dribble drive. So when Drew Peterson does shoot well, he scored 27 points on February 12th against UCLA, and Isaiah Mobley was out that night with a broken nose, suffered a week earlier against Arizona on February 5th. So USC seemed like a huge underdog without its best player. against UCLA. But Drew Peterson goes 27 and 12 points, rebounds, 5 block shots, 4 assists. When he plays great, USC's great. He really is kind of the weather vane player for USC. So obviously Miami will want to contain Isaiah Mobley before anyone else, but the X factor is Drew Peterson. That's the other guy Miami can't allow to get hot.
And both players named all Pac-12 first team, a little bit deeper, of a team than other conferences with the 5 guys, but still great seasons by both guys. Peterson at 6'9" certainly provides some matchup problems. And also, USC's size, that's what we'll look at. We talked about Mobley inside the interior scoring, also can shoot threes, but they go 6'9", kind of across the board, and Chavez Goodwin and Max Akponkpolo, there, and Boogie Ellis, as you mentioned. But all those guys will make it interesting for Miami, who plays small. They got their 3 guards that they lean on, but Jordan Miller and Sam Wardenberg kind of playing this 5-out offense. It's going to be interesting to see how Miami contains them on defense, but they want to turn them over. They've done a good job of that with teams. That's how they're going to counter, USC or any team size, is they like to turn teams over. And we'll talk about that Washington game. USC gets the win, but they do turn the ball over 23 times just a couple games ago there in the conference tournament. In turn, we talked about when USC looks good, what they do well. When they don't, in particular, whether it's that Washington game with the turnovers, but 0-2 against Arizona, 1-2 against UCLA, 0-2 against Stanford. I'm sure Miami's going to look at those games, 3 teams accounting for the 6 of the 7 losses. I'm sure Miami coaches are going to look to see what those teams did well, and certainly Arizona and UCLA are very good teams. But when it's not going well for USC, what's the issues that pop up?
Yeah, you mentioned it, turnovers and, not very good 3-point defense. Now, here's the thing. USC started the season 13-0, and in that start, USC was averaging about 9 turnovers a game. USC was actually a great team in terms of protecting the ball, and obviously that fell off a cliff against Washington. Also committed 15 turnovers against UCLA in Pauley Pavilion, not the Pac-12 semifinal, but the regular season game against UCLA on March 5th on the road. So yeah, when the turnovers are flowing and when USC is not defending the 3-point line, those 2 things, it's a nightmare for the Trojans, because the Trojans are not an elite offensive team by any stretch. They do struggle to score. They do go through scoring droughts. USC needs this game against Miami, and it needs most games against good teams to be a rock fight. USC loves the rock fight. And it's interesting. See, I have a producer on our Trojans Wired podcast who is a Miami alum. And so we're going to have a lot to talk about on the podcast that we're going to record later this week. And one thing that my producer and Miami friend has noted all season long is that when Miami scores 65 or more, Canes practically never lose. They have something like 23-6, something like that, or 22-4, something like that. And when they don't reach 65, they almost always lose. So USC wants to play this game in the high 50s, low 60s. That's definitely going to be one of the core keys to this matchup.
Yeah, shout out to Ari there. When I'm looking at USC, the offensive rebounding, when you talk about the side, actually, yeah, let's stick with the offensive rebounding. They've seemed to have done well according to metrics, analytics. They've done well, and it feels like, look, if Miami gives up a bunch of second half points, that could be an issue. We saw it against Duke a little bit. I thought Banchero could have shot even more. He goes 8 for 10 in that game. If teams want to pound Miami down low or in the paint, they're going to have success. It just feels like if that'll be a big key if Miami can prevent those offensive rebounds. How big of a factor do you feel that is? And Miami goes into these games, and coach knows they're not going to out rebound their opponents. It just can't be one of these, get out rebounded by 15 to 20 sub type of thing, or offensive rebounds can't just get overloaded on that because a second chance points. How important do you think that is? And how much of a factor can that be for USC's standpoint?
So, we're talking about a number of different factors, and they're interrelated, right? If USC doesn't turn the ball over, USC might shoot poorly in this game. USC is not a good 3-point shooting team, but if you're throwing up a shot which misses, you can go get it on the glass. You can clean up the mess. So as long as USC isn't committing turnovers and can rebound its own missed shots, it can play volleyball on the glass. And that is a definite path to victory for USC just as long as you avoid the turnover. So this game, in my mind, comes down to, is it going to be a backcourt dominated game, or is it going to be a front court dominated game? And USC very obviously wants it to be a front court dominated game because of the length, because of the size. USC has a lot of guys who are 6'8" or taller. I mean, even in the backcourt, like Drew Peterson's a guard, but he's 6'8". So USC will want to play this game above the rim, on the backboard, rebounding missed shots. But it needs a low turnover count in order to create that kind of game where it has a lot of shots to be able to miss. If you're turning the ball over, you're not getting a shot up in the first place. So that's part of it. And the other part is, Isaiah Mobley, he likes to face up as a scorer, but this might be the game where he needs to have his low post game, with the back to the basket. USC might need to feed him more in the low post. We'll see if Isaiah Mobley's capable of playing that way. The other obvious part is that Drew Peterson is a creative passer. So what you might see is Drew Peterson around the elbow area up high, feeding Isaiah Mobley, lob passes, playing the game over the top against the Miami defense. That's going to be something to look for. So not the guards feeding Isaiah Mobley, or not the small guards like Boogie Ellis and Ethan Anderson, but Drew Peterson, also maybe Chavez Goodwin, just, throwing a pass from one big man to another over the top of the Miami defense.
Yeah. And just looking at that, USC, we talked about the height and things that Mobley can do inside, but USC is attempting 9 threes a game. In comparison, 19 3-point attempts a game. Miami's attempting 20. So for a team that has the size, they are shooting from the outside. I'm sure Miami's going to hope to take their chances with some perimeter shots, as opposed to just pounding it down low, like you said. So we'll see how that works out. Miami's strengths are its guards: Charlie Moore at point guard, Isaiah Wong and Cameron McGusty as the off-ball guards there. All of those guys can score points. They've scored in bunches this year. Cam leads them in scoring over 17 a game, first team all ACC guy. They can knock down shots from the perimeter. They also give teams trouble with their penetration. I'm curious, with USC and its size, like you said, how do you think they've defended guards throughout the season?
Yeah, so, USC couldn't really keep up with Arizona's guards, but I mean, Arizona does set a very high standard. One point of concern is that Washington State hit 15 threes, shot 15 of 31 on three-pointers, and nearly beat USC in Los Angeles in late February. So USC entered the meat of the Pac-12 season, January 11th, entering the January 11 game at Stanford. USC was holding opponents under 28% shooting from three-point range. But then when Stanford swept USC, beat the Trojans twice, and when other teams have beaten the Trojans, they shoot at least 40% from three-point range. So I'm definitely looking at a game in which Miami's going to want to shoot around 40% from three-point range. If it can hit that benchmark, the Canes should be in pretty good shape. And so if I'm Andy Enfield, head coach of USC, I'm really trying to, in my mind, start the game by running Miami off the three-point line, not letting the Canes get a comfort zone as three-point shooters. But now as the game continues, if I'm able to run them off the line early, then I might mix in some zone defense with the length that I have at the top of the zone, and just give Miami different looks so that the guards aren't able to get comfortable, and you will have smaller guards shooting against bigger guards, and that might be a difficult for the Hurricanes. So USC should start by playing the drive. So, taking away the shot, allowing the drive, so that when Miami's guards get into the paint, you have Isaiah Mobley waiting for them with his length to alter shots. Now, obviously, the risk there for USC is that Mobley could get in early foul trouble, which would be devastating if that happened. But I think that's how USC needs to start the game. And it's just going to be a matter of trying to get the Miami guards out of their comfort zone, not ever allowing them to settle into the flow of this game.
Yeah, it's interesting with the different defenses and lined up. And Miami obviously faces Syracuse in that 2-3 zone, which has given them trouble over the years. This was not a good defensive team by Syracuse this season, so it's not a good indicator. but just recently, Miami played Boston College in the ACC tournament and really had trouble as Boston College flipped from man to zone throughout the game. In short stretches, they would kind of flip back and forth and gave Miami trouble, just the different looks. So it's interesting you're mentioning different looks that USC could provide, and especially, like you said, to kind of contain Miami's guards with how they're able to score. So that'll certainly be interesting. Cam Agussi's been pretty consistent. Isaiah Wong has kind of been up and down at times. He's coming off a 1 for 11 shooting performance there against Duke. So certainly he's going to need to play better. And then Charlie Moore's been pretty consistent at times at the guard spots. One guy who stepped up, and Coach K has really complimented him, Sam Warder, these other two guys for Miami. Sam Waterberg is going to be a big one for Miami. He's their 5 guy, about 6'10". He's probably going to be matched up against Mobley, most likely. So it's going to be interesting because Sam likes to stretch out and kind of play that around the perimeter when I talked about a 5-out offense on the offensive side. And then defensive side, you talked about foul trouble with Mobley. Certainly Wardenberg's going to have to stay out of foul trouble. This is a team that does not have a lot of depth. They are at its best when they have their 5 starters on the court 30, 35 minutes a game. So that's where Miami is strong at, and when they can kind of play to their strengths. We talked about that all the time, all year long. When Miami can play to its strengths with small ball, knocking down threes, get their guards points, that's where they're at their best, and create turnovers. It's interesting we're kind of mentioning turnovers as such a path for either team to win. Miami's got to force these guys into turnovers, and USC definitely does not want to turn the ball over that much. Are there some other things that we've not talked about yet, Matt, that maybe stand out to you that, look, maybe this is a smaller factor in this game that we haven't talked about quite yet?
Well, one thing is USC's health heading into this game. Isaiah White went off in a very big way for USC last year in the Sweet 16 against Oregon. He scored over 20 points. I forget the exact number, but he scored over 20 points. He's been injured for much of this season. USC hasn't been able to get him healthy, hasn't played the last few weeks. So this is a Friday game. It's a Friday-Sunday bracket, so that gives USC a little extra time to see if Isaiah White can be healthy in this game. Because he hasn't played, he might be rusty, but also he would give USC fresh legs if he's able to even play 10 to 12 minutes. And the other player who's been battling health problems, Reese Dixon Waters, he's coming off the bench for USC. He's going to be part of the core of the team next year, but he's been a young pup learning on the bench in a reserve role. And early in the season, he was playing about 10 minutes a game, but recently he's been getting about 20 minutes a game. But he had a groin injury that kept him out of the Pac-12 semifinals against UCLA. With the Friday tip, that gives him another day to get healthy. He's a very energetic, active defender on the perimeter. USC is going to really need Reese Dixon Waters' defense. If he can't go, or if he's very ineffective and limited in whatever he's able to do, that's a big advantage for Miami.
Yeah, and just from a Miami standpoint, if there's one guy maybe that we haven't talked about that maybe could be a factor in this one, I think it's Anthony Walker, 6'8" forward off the bench, athleticism. He can maybe match up with these guys in terms of height. And, he doesn't score a bunch of points or anything like that, but, you see it in spurts. Maybe it's a 3, maybe gets a nice dunk to get the team going. He's kind of one of those guys that gets to them about 15 minutes off the bench. So that'll be interesting to watch. Matt, this was great. Plenty to talk about. The winner of this game will play on Sunday, as you mentioned, likely against the 2 seed in Auburn, 27-5, if they get past 15 seed Jacksonville State. So, Matt, appreciate you taking the time and enjoy the games this week.
Chris, thanks so much for having me. This was fun.